The current system of investing 649 small funds is failing, and taxpayers are paying a high price. Under the current arrangement, Illinois' suburban and downstate police and firefighter pension funds are underperforming by nearly $1 million a day.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel.
Jeff Berkowitz, Public Affairs here in Chicago.
And Jeff, we're going to be...
Beautiful Chicago, Illinois.
Well, I was going to say, sorry to step on you. We're going to be talking about some of the pensions, and pensions have long been an issue, but this week there's been a development. Some say it's a major development, others say not, but at least we have some development where we have a bipartisan group on the Governor's Pension Commission. And at the end of last May, when the legislature went out of session, the governor did mention that pensions and property taxes were going to be among some of his top priorities as we move forward.
Well, I don't mean to disappoint from the start, but although it's an important step in terms of raising the rate of return, and we should have taken it long ago, it's not really what we call pension reform. I know the governor says that, but it's kind of a misnomer. It only affects, in a sense, about 4.5% of the problem. So you got to start somewhere. But anybody thinks this is pension reform, they're sadly mistaken.
Well, I think you're wrong in that. I think the question isn't whether it's reform or not. I think the question is it enough reform? And I think the governor and the others on this commission would say, we're not done yet. This is just the first step, but it shows that we can make changes. And basically what they're doing is they're saying there are 650 different pension systems downstate. And what they're going to do is combine these into two. And so with that, they're going to have a lot of savings because they're not going to have different fees going to investment managers constantly. And so let's listen to what the governor had to say on some of these reforms here.
This consolidation that's occurring that we're talking about today has to do with the downstate and suburban fire and police pensions. The subject of Chicago pensions as well as the statewide pensions will be taken up by the task force going forward, but we have 649 funds that are going to become two. That's a momentous change, and because it increases returns by nearly 2%, we can make a significant dent in the underfunded liabilities that exist in those funds.
Okay, so the issue here is this is what we call downstate, i.e. everything other than Chicago. So if it's west of Chicago, if it's suburbs, if it's downstate, we call that downstate. That's what's affected, not Chicago, and not the major liability of Illinois. I remind our viewers, Illinois, the state of Illinois government is about $200 billion, for the B, unfunded. The city of Chicago is about $70 billion, counting CPS, unfunded in pensions. That's $270 billion. All of the rest of downstate that the governor is dealing with, it's about $10 billion unfunded. So you see what I mean? He's affecting less than 5% of the problem, number one. Number two, he's not, the governor and this proposed legislation is not dealing with the underlying problem, which is pension benefits are too high, they will continue to be too high, and this does not reduce them at all. It raises the rate of return 1 to 3%. He said approximately 2, cut it down the middle. You know, that just, it's nice. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but and you got to start somewhere.
Right.
But he didn't say any of the things that I just said. Now, my criticism is, with all due respect to the governor, you want to be forthright, you want to be candid. If he said what I'd said, then has full disclosure.
The governor said there's still a lot to be done. Everyone would agree with that. And
Terry, excuse me, saying a lot to be done does not say, I hope, what I just said. He needs to put in the details. He needs to recognize there is a problem. This doesn't touch that part of the problem, which is the major part. So, and worse, Christine Radogno, who used to be the Senate leader
for the Republicans,
she's a Republican, She didn't say a thing. She just got up there and said, it's great to be back. We're doing great work and all that. Come on, Chris. That was wrong. You weren't saying that when you were the leader.
I think look, people in this press conference that they held, obviously are trying to put a happy face on it, and they're, look, let's be positive about something that's positive. What they're doing is a positive. Is it enough by itself? No, nobody would say that is. Let's take a look for a moment here.
Those funds, many downstate public safety pensions are less than 30% funded, and that graphic we're showing the viewers shows the number of those funds. And guess what? They're still going to be less than 30% unfunded, okay? They'll gradually remove a small portion of that. They will, I don't know if in 20 years, 30 years, they even get to the point where they're 90% funded, probably not. But even if they did, Terry, that would leave that $270 billion mess out.
It's obviously a huge issue. So just so the people know, again, every one of these would have some investment person taking a cut. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but it's inefficient if you have 650 different pension funds and everyone's taking a cut, as compared to combining them and having two put together. I'm not even sure why they're doing two.
I think that's a mistake. Let me just correct you, stop you right there.
Okay.
I think. I could be wrong. Of course, we all make mistakes, including me, sadly. This takes 650 sort of pension funds, if you want to think about it, municipalities, localities, and essentially it aggregates them, it consolidates them. So the two are a fire fund and a police fund. So that allows you, because the size was so small for many of these things, they couldn't even invest in equities. They wouldn't qualify for a number of estimates.
Right.
As we know, equity generally
Equities meaning stocks.
higher returns than bonds.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Stocks may
Right.
higher than bonds. So that's one way in which they use. Two, you may be able to diversify more. You may be able to have access to a broader range of funds with lower fees because you're now a bigger player, okay? So that's how you get, but notice what I said. When you get into equities, you are incurring higher risk. There is a positive,
Well,
draw a line.
You're
between risk and
also
reward.
incurring
Higher
a
the
risk. I
higher the-
will say, as an
the higher the
investor,
reward, it's-
you also
Sure,
incur
just let me
risk
finish
by,
for 1 second.
all right, go ahead.
There. A risk-reward relationship simply means as you get a higher reward, you are incurring more risk. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you should recognize that. And one more thing, and then I'll be quiet. We've had what is it now, Terry? And you'd know this better than I. Is it something like a 10 or 11 year expansion that's been going on in the economy straight? Is that what it is roughly now?
I don't
10 or
remember.
11 years?
We are in record territory of
So
a
we'll say
bull
over 10
market.
years.
And even
So-
today, by the way, the market's up about 400 something points. And
My
we're
point-
approaching 27,000 on the Dow as we record this.
My point to you is, at some point, we may have a correction, a recession, a
Well, we
reversal
will.
of the
At some
trend.
point, we will.
Okay. And the point is, when you have that correction, Terry, your rates of return on those equities you're now investing in will go down. And if you say, oh, I thought I was going up a point or two, so I was going from whatever they're making
Look,
now, like 4% to 6%.
yeah, but look,
That, my point is, you got to worry about that correction. You got to worry about how that affects pensions. You got to take that into account. Okay.
all right,
Number one,
let me
you
throw
gotta
out something else that people
so
need
much
to
more,
take
so
into
much
account.
more. Okay.
Here's the
So
thing.
much more.
One of the reasons, this is an example of what should have been done years ago. You cutting your cost. This is a way where you can cut government cost, or the cost on the pensions. It's not even government costs, it's just government bringing this together so that these pension funds are more efficient. It's a good thing to do. As the governor said, I don't know if he's right on this, getting a 2%, but that's 2% compounded. And the other thing is, and I have faulted the government pension funds for this for years, they underinvest in stocks. Stocks do give you a higher rate of return. You can be diversified, you can not, it's, people always who don't invest think that stocks are too risky. They're wrong. They're wrong because if you only invest in bonds, you're not going to get the needed rates of return. And these pensions, Jeff, are still woefully underfunded. They're going to be woefully underfunded after these changes are made. But it is a step in the right direction. So that's basically what our viewers ought to take away from this. And to the extent that they can put more money in stocks, it's a good thing. Markets always go up and down, but over time, they're going to go up. You can't just look at those, as we see now.
One thing, it's not so much a cut in costs, which you said, it's a higher rate of return. And somewhere they hope in the range of 1 to 3%, he said 2%. It could be 0.5%, could be 2.5%. We don't know. That's number one. But the core of the pension problem, Terry, is that they are way too high for what individuals were putting in. And it wasn't the pension holiday. It wasn't the skipping.
That's right.
The pensions were, and the reason why they're too high is there's a temptation by politicians, especially Democrats who are closely aligned with unions, which is what these pensions are dealing with, is we will promise you higher pension benefits, and we hope you will give us a contribution to our political campaign. We will get to that topic of corruption a little bit later.
Well,
So that
you're
right
on that. No, you're right on that.
So
and
that
that's,
problem is not touched by this.
Right.
The pensions are too high. We're not amending the Constitution so we can cut those benefits, and we're not removing the incentive of politicians in the future to continue to make the same mistakes, to promise higher pensions in exchange for campaign contributions. And
All right.
do I expect the governor?
I'm going to
say that?
remind people, no, look, I'm going to remind people, I'm not bragging, I'm just pointing it out. I've mentioned before, I did my master's thesis almost 25 years ago now on the coming collapse of publicly funded pensions. And for the reasons you just mentioned, everyone wants to have big benefits, they don't want to put much in. And so there's the bias in the way these political government pensions are structured is always that they put too much benefits on the table for the amount that's going into them. And so, as you just said, it's not that the government took a pension holiday. Obviously, that does impact it. But even if there had never been a pension holiday, the fact is the amount of money going in is not enough to cover the cost of the benefits being paid. And frankly, as I tell people, I don't care if you make $100,000 a year in a pension. I care about, are they funded? Did you put enough in to justify that? So that's just something people ought to understand. Let's move along perhaps to another.
Can I say one thing
Go
though,
ahead.
to bring
Sure.
to a conclusion is that the governor and the task force, the governor announced the results of this task force, which we've just been discussing yesterday. We're taping this show on October 11th. He announced on October 10th. He said he plans to have this legislation introduced and passed in the veto session, which is 2 weeks coming up. The first week is October 28th. Okay, 3 days in that week, skip a week, then another week. So nothing's happened yet, folks. Sure, it's if the governor is supporting it and the Democratic Party is supporting it, and the Democrats are super majorities in the House and the Senate, this is pretty damn likely to pass, okay? But it hasn't happened yet, so that's number one. Number two, our viewers are probably saying, thankfully, can you move on to another topic other than pensions? Yes, we'll do it right now, right?
Well, I'm going to applaud the people for taking these steps. They're going to have to take much harder steps. So it's kind of like saying, if your kid got out of kindergarten, it's a good thing he got out of kindergarten, but it's a long way before they get their college degree, and that's kind of an analogy I would make as far as where we need to go in these pensions. It's a first step, it's a baby step, so we'll leave it at that. The other thing, and I'm going to remind the viewers that coming up at the end of this month, beginning on October 28th, is going to be the fall veto session. And so there's going to be, including the pensions, there's going to be other issues, and one of that is going to be a gun bill. And the bill is SB 1966. We covered this during the spring session. And this is going to be an effort, it's already passed the House. Those who fear gun control fear that this is going to be brought back up in the Senate. The governor's already said that he would sign it. And it has to do with putting more restrictions on the FOID card, that's the regulation for gun owners. Let's listen to what Todd Vandermeide, who used to be with the NRA of Illinois and now has to do with those who have the gun stores, what he said happened recently or earlier this year. And one of the things that some of the people who are in favor of guns fear is going to happen if this passes.
We had a 83-year-old Marine veteran who let his FOID card expire. The individual, that then triggered a revocation of his carry license. And so state police, post Aurora, have sent a couple of detectives up to his house to confiscate his firearms because of that revocation notice. So they took into their possession 2 revolvers and a 1911 pistol. And this individual, no criminal record, not a well-being check, not a mental health issue, nothing like that, was removed of his right to self-defense in his own home. The core tenets of the Heller decision. So we think this is going to be ripe for a court challenge to strike down the FOID card.
So that there's as Todd mentioned, first of all, there is a challenge to the FOID card that's in the court systems that they think could invalidate that. And on October 28th, when the legislature comes back to Springfield, there is going to be a mini march. There is a massive march that they had earlier this year, back at the end of the month of March. So there's going to be a number of gun owners now being contacted to come down to Springfield. So this is always a very emotional issue, and for those who are both against guns as well as those who are in favor of guns, it's always something that gets a lot of attention.
Well, I would just say I doubt this is really going to happen and be handled in the veto session. If I had to speculate as to what, in addition to the pension legislation that we referred to coming up, the governor said he wants it to be brought up and passed. He didn't say what else he wants. I don't think he wants to get into the gun issue. So, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him by the folks who are pushing these higher FOID fees to do it. But one thing I think there will be pressure on is to think about getting into the Chicago casino rewrite issue, because that casino legislation passed, but as we discussed before, it seemed to allow, in terms of, so the taxes are so high on the Chicago casino, maybe they get like a 1% return, and if that goes easily, could be wiped out by operating expenses, they get nothing. So there aren't too many people. It appears there won't be many people interested in participating, being owners of that portion of the Chicago casino, unless the legislation is passed. So I think that's my bet for what might come up in the veto session.
Jeff,
in addition to the
let's move along. The other thing that's interesting to follow relative to the legislature is Senator Sandoval, as you see here on the screen. And Senator Sandoval, who is the chairman of the Transportation Committee, and of course we just passed the Capitol bill, he is now under apparent investigation by the FBI. Some files have been removed from both his Capitol office and I think some of the other offices. We don't know where this is going. Again, everyone has the presumption of innocence, but this has caused a lot of embarrassment for a number of people in the legislature. The governor has come out and said Senator Sandoval should be removed from his committee chairmanship of the Transportation Committee. Earlier this week, Jeff, the governor was talking about a different issue, digital data centers, but at that, Senator Lauren Murphy, who is a Democrat from Des Plaines, was asked about this issue. Let's just take a quick listen to what she had to say.
Lauren Murphy represents the 28th district, and I think the governor's quotes the other day in the paper were something that I too believe in that it's a really difficult time. But during the investigation, I think that the Senator Sandoval should step down from his chair of transportation.
Well, that's an example of a reformed Democratic legislature in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. That used to be a Republican seat. It could be one again. So if you go to Democrats in Highland Park and Des Plaines and Arlington Heights, if there are any there yet, if they're not, they'll be there soon, so forth, you'll find that they're going to they're going to be reformers. They're not big fans of Mike Madigan. They make their bargains, they get along with him, they have to deal with him, but they're not big fans of Cullerton saying, "Let the guy there, presumption of innocence." They believe in a presumption of innocence, but they want it to be clean. They agree with the governor. The governor says he should step down because the governor knows he's got a $45 billion fund. He's got this progressive income tax that's going to be on the ballot in 2020. He doesn't want to have all this corruption and scent of corruption and odor of corruption. He's doing what he can. She's joining. There's a division among Democrats in the Senate of whether Sandoval should step down or not, but there'll be others. And just as an aside, I think the governor thinks, and he might be right, he has a shot to be president of the United States someday. He's got to succeed as a governor of a big state. And one thing you do is you don't want to have any corruption around. If it's there, you want to be known as a corruption fighter. I'm not saying that in a cynical way. It's a good thing that the guy wants to advance and become president. He wants to do good things, and he'll be judged on that. So I just note that.
So one of the things that not everything evolves in the state this week around the Capitol. We still have Chicago and the Chicago teachers unions threatening a strike. And Jeff, that comes up on October 17? Just a little bit under a week away right now. What's the latest on that?
Well, I think the smart money says there won't be a strike because the state of Chicago has given away the store pretty much already. They'll do whatever they can. When I asked the mayor at a press conference just a few days ago, I said, "Gee, you've been negotiating a while. We know what the union's been getting. What did you get? What did you get for giving up all of this?" She said, "I haven't got anything yet because they haven't given us a proposal." She said labor peace. I think she meant that's what she wants. Avoid a strike. She gets labor peace, but she doesn't have it yet. But she'll get it if she wants it, if she's willing to pay for it. The question is, what will it require to avoid a strike? My guess, she'll find something, they will go along. Jesse Sharkey, the president of the CTU, he'd much rather have more and more than saying, "Oh, I'm so big, I could do a strike." So, I think
Jeff,
that's
what is it
happen.
about? Is it about, it apparently is not about salary, or, that's part of it?
No, because they've already given the salary is going up.
Let me do this.
16%.
Let me play a quick bite from the mayor and then come
Sure.
back and respond to it.
Into our budget, all the things that they said that they wanted, which we agree with, more social workers, more librarians, more nurses. The deal is there to be had, and there's no reason over 30 days that we can't get this inked and done.
Okay, that was a 2-month-old clip. They started the negotiations, they gave them everything. They said 14% increase over 5 years. The union wanted 16%, they said okay. In reality, folks, that's a misnomer. It's not 14, it's not 16, 25%. Because the 16% doesn't count the fact that you move lanes, you move steps. I won't go into all of that, but when you consider that, it's indisputable. It's a guaranteed 25% increase for teachers over 5 years. How would you folks who are watching this out there, do you have a guaranteed 25% salary increase? And remember, you got a great pension, because remember, if you've been teaching in CPS for 34 years, something like that, full time, you're now fully vested, etc., you now got a salary about $98,000 a year. Say that again, 98,000, okay? If you're sitting out there and you're part of the half of Illinois, or half of Chicago that earns less than 50,000, and teachers earn 98,000, okay? And your pension will be, before this contract kicks in, before all of the benefits kick in, 70,000 a year, okay? So that's what you have. So they're not fighting about that. Here's what they're fighting about. Jesse Sharkey, the president of the CTU, he wants to have more members. If you got more members, you got more fees. Guess what? Even Jesse can have like Karen Lewis, a $300,000.
They want more positions, right? They want to have a set number of
Yes,
positions
because if you get
of nurses
200
and
social
counselors.
200 nurses, zillions of this.
They don't want the
You know
mayor
what?
to control that. They want to have it written into their contract, how many positions
Right.
will be at these individual schools.
Just
So,
call it Mayor Sharkey.
is the mayor going to give in?
Jesse
What's your
Sharkey.
best guess? Is the mayor giving in to that, or is that going to be a
No, that's
prolonged
that is
fight?
I think she won't give on that. She may have a side agreement. She needs wiggle room, or she's not going to give up on being mayor within the first 4 months of her tenure. Because if she does that, folks, you can call Jesse Sharkey Mayor Sharkey, because he'll have control. The mayor needs flexibility. Remember, she has coming up on October 23rd her budget speech, where presumably she'll tell us how she's going to deal with the $838 million hole in her $10 billion budget. She needs some flexibility because maybe she can't really hire 200 social workers, 200 more, maybe only 150. If she puts that in the contract, they get a contract, they can go to court, they can enforce.
We'll keep our eyes open for this, and you say on the 23rd, and obviously we'll see if they go on strike on the 17th. Let's move along. One of the other big stories, not an Illinois story per se, it's the whole thing about the impeachment effort going on in the U.S. House of Representatives. As we speak, there's also the Chinese delegation is back in Washington negotiating a trade deal. The president just said as we taped this last night that they're making progress on that. This morning, the stock market, as I mentioned earlier, is up heavily on that trade deal. We had a chance to talk to U.S. Congressman Darren LaHood, who was in Springfield earlier this week, and he talked about these issues.
China has been ripping us off for 25 years, stealing our technology, our intellectual property, our theft on the cyber front. No one has been able to get them to change that behavior. We need to change that. And so I give the president credit for trying to get them to change their behavior. But I worry we cannot be in a trade war long term, 2-3 years from now. So I think in the immediate, if we can get them to come to the table, they're in Washington, D.C. today, trying to work on a resolution. It's in the long-term interest of both of our countries to resolve this, but as long as you have an actor that continues to try to steal and rip off and engage in cyber theft of our intellectual property, I think you gotta hold them accountable for that, and that's really what this trade war is all about. I understand it's hurting right now, many sectors of our economy, but overall we have to get them to change their behavior.
Okay, this is about re-election of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. Folks, as we sit here on October 11th, he will surely be impeached. That is, the U.S. House will file articles of impeachment. The Democrats have those votes. They don't really need Republican votes for that. That'll happen. He's impeached. Doesn't mean he's removed. As you know, folks, it goes to the Senate. The Republicans have control of that. If they hang tough, even if they lose some, he will not be removed. If the China deal, it goes well this week and in ensuing weeks, and tariff threat goes away, the economy continues to boom at 2.5%, 3% GDP. Trust me, folks, Donald Trump will have been impeached, not removed, and reelected. You can take that to the bank and collect.
Jeff, I even going to predict that they won't. Look, the House might vote to impeach. I don't think they will. I don't think a lot of people in the Democratic side of the aisle want to be on the record, and you have people like Sherry Bustos, who a lot of people in her district voted for Trump in her counties. They don't want to go on record as saying they voted to remove the president.
We disagree. That's a good place to end. We're going to get out on time, Terry.
Right. Well, for once we will. And Jeff, thanks for joining us. Viewers, thanks for watching. And don't forget to sign up on our YouTube channel and leave your comments. We always welcome them. Jeff, until
We'll
next
read them next week. See you.